And this entire bureau was inside the palace and is manned, all staffed by eunuchs. But for the emperor himself, he also has his own paper house. And you have another group of eunuchs working there for the premium quality of papers. So imagine how many people were there.
Yeah. So the emperor gets the double soft ply toilet roll from his own special paper house.
That's the one.
Hello, Che. Thank you very much for joining us on Echoes of History. It's fantastic to have you with us. And we're going to talk today about the 8 tigers. So I guess the first thing to maybe clear up for people like me who aren't experts is that we're not talking about tigers here, are we? We're talking specifically about 8 eunuchs. So I thought, could you start off by explaining for us a little bit about what a eunuch is in the Chinese court?
Well, about eunuchs, eunuchs are essentially castrated men for palace labor duty. And this is not really a Chinese tradition. This is a practice that you have been seen in empires all over the world. For instance, we have the Byzantine who also keeps eunuchs, and then the Persian Empire, and then the ancient Indian Empire. Well, eunuchs are everywhere. The good thing about them is that if you use them, they can do jobs that usually women cannot handle, and they keep your royal bloodline pure.
So there's kind of an element that they're not a threat at court around royal women.
Of course, because they lack the, let's say, tools to do it.
And did eunuchs have a special status in Chinese society sort of during the Ming Dynasty when Assassin's Creed Chronicles China is set? Were eunuchs considered special?
Eunuchs were indeed considered special, but not a good kind of special, let's say. Unlike in other empires, in China, it has been endured a stigma for thousands of years. I don't know about other civilizations, but at least in China, it started with castrating POWs. Goes as far as in the age of sages, which is 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, when people still live in clans. Class leader usually castrated, POWs and use them as slave labor because they're castrated. So even after they escape, they cannot go back and reproduce to make their enemy clans bigger. So you see, they start as POW. They start as in a lower position. And then for at least, hundreds of years, castration has been used as a form of capital punishment. So that's another layer of brand. So eunuch as sinners, as criminals, even when castration was banned from using as a punishment, the stigma remains. When we go to the Ming Dynasty, that's almost 1,500 years later, and then the stigma was still present. So eunuchs in Ming Dynasty were still treated and seen as a form of criminals, even they themselves admitted. So they were indeed special, but not in a good kind.
And did the lifestyle and the duties of a eunuch distinguish them from others at court, particularly from other servants? Was there anything that would have made it obvious that a servant at court was a eunuch as opposed to any other servant?
For palace duties, and of course, there's only eunuchs can attend it. But for the external ones, the ones who work in the outer court, in the provincial front, they were jobs specifically, designed for eunuch. But other people can do it. It's just in Ming Dynasty that it is reserved for eunuch duty only. So if a person who has no beard, no mustache, and work on some kind of special jobs, then he must be a eunuch. As for the living styles, well, let's say that the eunuch living style is pretty much the same as anyone in the Ming Dynasty. They don't dress differently, and they don't, eat different things or something. So if you see a eunuch in Ming Dynasty, the only way you can, identify them is because they don't have any facial hair, and that's about it.
Yeah. I think it's interesting then that they go from this position of being POWs and criminals and castration is inflicted as a form of punishment to being valued right at the heart of Ming Dynasty courts How do they make that transition from being the sort of criminal element to being some of the people closest around Chinese emperors?
Well, for this one, it's a procedure that lasts for several thousand years. And when China was still in disarray before the first unification, it was known as the Qin Dynasty. Before that, the Chinese kingdoms already had a long tradition of using eunuchs because, like we said before, it's great labor. When that happens, imagine a family of monarch who lives in the palace, right? Aside from, the blood relatives, the only person, let's say, the person you can see is usually female servant or eunuch servant. So many monarch grows attached to these men, or these half men, let's say. And then they were essentially, the persons who raise, sometimes even educate the monarch. Monarch rules attached to eunuch has been a long-term problems for the Chinese emperor families, but nobody can fix it. So they slowly changed from mere manservant to close advisors, despite the fact that most of them were never educated. When we go all the way to the Ming Dynasty, it has been a long-term tradition that every monarch, when they're still crown prince, will have selected eunuch as their close manservant. And when the monarch rise to power, enthroned as the emperor, and these eunuchs will take important palace jobs. Despite the fact that literatists, the Chinese literatists, they really hated these men, they still think they were justified to stay in the court. They just hate that these people had more power than they did.
Yeah, very much human nature, I think, that, isn't it? Do we have a sense then of how many eunuchs were at the court at any one time?
There's no specific number, but usually for Ming Dynasty, number flows from 12,000 to 20,000, because it is a huge city that you have to maintain. And to make this thing clear, that is, a eunuch did not only serve as a servant inside a palace. The imperial palace is essentially a huge machine that's pretty much can function on its own. Say if you cut off all the aides from the imperial city, it can still function on its own for a certain amount of time. These eunuchs, they were servants, but they were also artisans. They can produce specific things for the emperor. The emperor, maybe in his entire lifetime, only seen, a couple hundred eunuchs as manservant or something, but there are thousands more, tens of thousands more working for him. He just never met them before. We have a good example here, that is the production of paper. The imperial palace has a specific eunuch agency for the production of papers. All kind of papers, the paper they use to write, the paper they use for wrapping, and then the paper used for toilet. And this entire bureau was inside the palace, and it's staffed by eunuchs. But for the emperor himself, he also has his own paper house, and you have another group of eunuchs working there for the premium quality of papers. So imagine how many people were there.
Yeah. So the emperor gets the double soft ply toilet roll from his own special paper house. Could anybody become a eunuch then? Because I'm kind of wondering, if it became this prestigious post almost at the heart of government, was it something that people might volunteer to do? Could you be recruited to do it? Or was it reserved for those who were being punished for something?
So this is an interesting question. And in Ming Dynasty, it's particularly chaotic. Ming Dynasty was infamous for all kind of, breaking of the rules. So theoretically, you can only be recruited. You cannot volunteer to go. When the recruiting was done by a senior eunuch official from the imperial city, and usually they goes to the civilian families and seek their newborn young boys. And then when selected, the imperial city will pay and then basically buy the child from the parent. And then the young boy will be castrated on the age of usually 4 to 5, and then he will live his entire life inside the palace as a manservant. So that's usually the one. In Ming Dynasty, well, let's say there are several factors for it. The eunuch surgery has become simpler and more accessible for common people. That's one. And the other thing is, the imperial city like I said, they do need a huge amount of eunuch, but the recruiting is going very slow. So that has prompted many people to either self-castrate or pay the castrators so they can become eunuchs. And third, in Ming Dynasty, working as a eunuch may not be the most honorific job you can ever have, but it really did pay. The payment was really good. Some family, they will have a little plan for their descendants. Say that if you have 3 children, right, the first one, he can work as a literatus, so he will get educated. He will try to participate in the imperial civil servant exam and then be one of the civil servants. And the other one, it might be involved in farming or involved in business. And the third one, well, make him a eunuch. So you get all the benefit from them, and then you don't lose the ability to have more grandchildren or the children of the grandchildren.
Slightly frightening though if you're the youngest, I guess. Were there any restrictions on who could become a eunuch in terms of kind of social status, ethnicity, anything like that? Were there any strict rules about who could be a eunuch?
Well, let's say that there's really no restrictions. So if you are one of those selected people, then of course you're selected, you can be. If not, then there's a chance that you won't get the opportunity to enter the palace. And when that happens, then sucks to be you. You're going to live a very, very miserable life. Despite the fact that the Chinese society pays eunuch well, they are still seriously despised and discriminated against. They were seen as incomplete. They were sometimes seen as monsters, or subhumans. So these are really, really bad for them. And this is unique to China. If you look at the Byzantine eunuch, they're completely different. They enjoy a much higher social status, unlike the Chinese eunuch. And like I said, this is because of the stigma that we talked before. Eunuchs are sin and criminals, and prisoner of wars. Even thousands of years did not eliminate this stigma. They only make it worse. But I digress. There's no true requirement for it. And one fact I know is in early Ming Dynasty, we even have eunuch imported from Korea. Eunuch imported from Korea. The Koreans, they do have a portion of their population was castrated and used as manservant to the Chinese imperial city. So it is not very uncommon to see Korean origin eunuchs and Korean origin concubines in Chinese court at that time.
I'm just going to get into this now because at the risk of this getting gory, and I should probably give a bit of a sensitivity warning here because I'm about to ask how someone became a eunuch. So you talked then about the fact that the surgery moves on and that it improves and it gets easier a little bit. So was there a kind of standard procedure, and how does it improve and develop over the years?
This is the part that all your male listeners might get phantom pain.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to listen to this. My eyes will probably water, so you might just have to wave at me when you're finished answering because I'm not sure I can listen to this. It's going to be painful to listen to.
Well, for starters, the Chinese style of surgery is different than with other empires. Every empire has their own way. Well, I heard about the Persian Empire. I'm not sure about that. They done it by burying the genitalia into the sand until it burns. I suspect that's not really a good process. And the Byzantinians, they use stones to crush the testicles. But usually you see for all these parts, they all retain the full genitalia. But for the Chinese procedure, they literally cut everything off. In that case, of course, it will be a huge wound, but it's actually safer in that case. It will be a single wound, and the survival rate goes actually as high as in 90%. These are done by professional castrators who work on animals because animal castration is a long-term practice and is necessary. And when people came, they can be castrated by imperial orders or they can be castrated by a fee. You can pay them for 5 taels of silver, and then that's the price in late Ming Dynasty. You pay them 5 taels of silver, you get castrated, and you get all the medical procedures. After that, the castrator will nurse you back to your health. And if you die in the process, well, I guess half of the money will return.
Is that a lot of money for that process? Was it expensive?
For a peasant, yes, it is a lot. For a peasant, it is a lot. So that's why many people research. So many of these poor peasants who aim to change their life, they go into self-castration. So if the castrator can do it, you can do it. But the problem is you're not professional. So it is very, very dangerous to do that on your own, but still possible.
Yeah, my eyes are definitely watering, and I've winced most of the way through that. So is there any kind of ritual significance to the process of castration, or was it just a functional cut it off and that's the end of it?
For the Chinese eunuchs, yes, it's just functional to remove all the functions. So there'll be nothing left. So in that case, it's a little bit like a man-made woman, a little bit like that.
Okay, we're probably going to get away from that a little bit now. So anyone who's been wincing can relax a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about then the 8 tigers. So when we talk about them, we're talking about 8 specific units. And was it definitely 8 people that we're talking about?
Yes, there were actually 8 of them.
Do we know how they came to form this kind of close-knit group? Who were they around the court? How did they come together?
Well, for this one, it's quite interesting because the term 8 tiger is not something that the eunuchs use. This is a name that literati gave them. The literati used the term 8 tigers to describe this group of 8 who are not exactly a very closely related group. It just happened to be 8 people who are on the top of the eunuch bureaucracy. In this case, we have to tell you a little bit about the Ming Dynasty situation. Eunuchs usually work as palace servants in China, and then there's usually a inner eunuch bureaucracy. Organization is important, especially when you have thousands and tens of thousands of workers working for you. You must have organization. So eunuch organization is something that constantly develops. And in Ming Dynasty, it changes a little bit. In Ming Dynasty, it has been the whole bureaucracy has surfaced from inner court to outer court, and it has been intertwined with the regular literati-based bureaucracy. So in this case, you can have eunuch supervisors and literati subordinate, and this is something that was unheard of, and that was something only in Ming Dynasty.
And presumably the literati wouldn't have liked that if they had this really negative view of the eunuchs. You wouldn't want one as your boss.
Of course. And it's actually even worse for them because back then, when the eunuch was implanted as the supervisor for the literati, they can object, they can talk to the emperor and eventually have him removed. But now, these are all part of the bureaucracy. So when you hate a eunuch as your supervisor, you can always try to remove him, but the position will remain. So if he's gone, a next one will come. This is the intertwined bureaucracy in Ming Dynasty. And these 8 tigers, despite the fact they were palace eunuch, they all work on top position of the intertwined bureaucracy.
When do the 8 tigers begin to rise to power? Kind of what time period are we in when we think about the 8 tigers?
The 8 tigers they were manservant of the Wuzong Emperor. The Wuzong Emperor is one of the Ming emperor who were enthroned on 1505, and he ruled all the way to 1521, I think. So these people, the fact how they rose to the power, well, they were the manservant of Wuzong Emperor when he was still crown prince. This is common practice. Every emperor will have their own eunuch manservant, and when the crown prince was enthroned, all of these eunuch manservants will rise to large power. That's just common practice. So there's no secret on how they rose to power. It's just their master has ascended.
When he becomes emperor, he brings a team with him who he's used to working with, who he's been around for a long, long time. And so as he moves into power, they move alongside him into much more powerful positions too.
Yes, exactly. That's not restricted to the monarch who born in the imperial palace. Wuzong Emperor never had any children, so when he died, the next one must be found from all these princes over the empire. And then eventually, that was the Shizong Emperor who has his successors. And in this case, Shizong Emperor brought his entire team from his local city. We have eunuchs, we have advisor, we have everyone, everyone, even their webmothers. All these people were brought into the imperial city and rose to power. And you can imagine the chaos it created.
And so do we know the individual names of the 8 tigers? Do we know who they were?
Yeah, we do. We have all 8 of them, but not all of them were really significant.
And do they have a leader amongst them then?
Well, there's a de facto leader, like we said before. The 8 tigers were a term given by the literati. The eunuch didn't use them. The de facto leader was a person named Liu Jin. Liu Jin was one of the most infamous eunuchs in Ming Dynasty, and for his power and for his wealth, of course, that's generated through corruption. He was one of the most favorite of Wuzhou Emperor's eunuchs, and then he was the leader. For all the rest, for the significant ones, there's a person named Zhang Yong. And Zhang was also one of the favorite. He's more of a military guy. He fought in several peasant rebellions and clans prince rebellions, and was actually a good fighter. Aside from that, the other ones, I won't say they're insignificant, but they were not as important as Liu Jin and Zhang Yong.
Yeah. So Liu Jin, then, if he's considered the most significant, does he have an actual job title at court? Is there a position that he holds that makes him the most important?
Well, he held the position of that was the supervisor or the seal keeper eunuch. That's the title of the job. The seal keeper eunuch of something called the Inner Etiquette Directorate. It sounds like it's something about manners. In reality, this is the top eunuch agency. In there, eunuchs are required to be educated, and there was an agency called the Inner Palace Academy that was designed to educate eunuchs. These educated eunuchs can help the monarch in their daily works by marking and reading all these imperial memorandums for him. So when you are the supervisor of this specific agency, you basically act as half of the emperor.
What do the 8 tigers do to become so notorious? Why do they get given this group name by the literati? Why do they stand out amongst all of the other eunuchs?
Well, the reason they stand out, like we said before, is because they work as the supervisor of top eunuch agencies. And as for what they did, well, mostly what they did is just what any eunuch did. They provide entertainment for the monarch. And Emperor Wuzong is one of those emperors who are infamous for being bad. In this case, he loved to play. He never cared about his country, and there's a good reason for it. To dive a little bit into that reason, is because during his time, an emperor can really play for all his life and never care about his job. It is okay because the imperial bureaucratic system has evolved so he can work on his own. The monarch's participation is no longer essential as long as the eunuch agency and the literati agency, that as in the imperial cabinet, as long as these two agencies are still functional, the empire can run on its own. So if he had so much free time, of course he's gonna want some fun, and the 8 tigers were there to provide all kind of entertainment for him.
Is their reputation really then a result of particular timing? So they arrive at a time when the roles of the eunuchs are changing, when you have that kind of hybrid bureaucracy that you described, where members of the literati could be subservient to eunuchs. And is it almost a backlash against that to paint them as this sort of evil gang of men, basically?
You can say that many of these prejudices, or maybe let's just say discrimination against eunuchs in Ming Dynasty, were mainly based on basically the resentment from literati. Well, I won't say all of them are unjustified, because eunuchs are not all sunshine and bunny. They really did many bad things. But mostly, like the case of A Tiger, it's just because they provide entertainment for the monarch. For literati, they prefer their monarch to stay more focused on governing instead of having fun. despite the fact that the empire can run on its own, they still require their monarch to, at least stay in the palace and meet their official once a month or twice a month or something. So that's a requirement. Wuzhong Emperor is particularly naughty in this case. He's the person that you can imagine him as a son of some rich guy in the imperial city, but you cannot imagine him as an emperor. Many things he did is quite childish in some case. I'll tell you a story about it. He once wanted to leave from the northern border of the empire, go to the outer side. The inner Asian nomad were there, and they were constantly harassing the local village, and that's where the Wuzhong Emperor was. As a boy, he won his own war. He wanted to fight all these nomads and make a name of himself, and all on his own. So that's just him and several eunuchs with him, and among these several eunuchs, one of them is the 8 tigers. You can imagine that the literati are going crazy about it. Nobody's going to allow him to do it. So what did he do? He dressed himself as a civilian and tried to leave. He actually managed to get out from the imperial city. So imagine that. In the morning, when you go to the palace and the emperor's gone.
And he's gone up north to start a war all by himself.
Yeah, he goes all the way to the northern border and was stopped by the guard of the pass. And at that time, he revealed himself to the emperor and ordered the guard to open the door for him. But the guard leader refused. So there goes the first attempt. So after that, he actually did it again. And this time he's smarter. So he find the timing when the guard leader was not there, and he successfully left the border. It was allegedly that when he leave the border, he will stand outside and basically make faces to the pass and just say, I'm out. Try to catch me. And he did actually start his, dream war with the Indonesian nomad, and he actually won it. Because the emperor.
So he was right all along.
Yeah, the emperor ran to the outside and is under serious threat from the Indonesian nomads. So the imperial guard was assembled, and they moved to protect the emperor. And then when the Indonesian nomad came, well, he will have sufficient power to fight this war. That's one of his dream wars. So imagine this kind of emperor as your monarch.
Yeah, when he started off, I was going to say he sounds like he's living a kind of playboy lifestyle as an emperor, but it sounds more like he was like a badly behaved teenager who's off picking fights all around the neighborhood and you sneaking out. It's just so difficult to control, which is not, I guess, what you want in an emperor.
Yeah, exactly. So he's a spoiled child. As we say. So the 8 tigers is here to provide all the things he needs, and one of the most infamous things is called the House of Panthers. The House of Panthers is let's say Ming Dynasty Disneyland. It's pretty much Ming Dynasty Disneyland. It's a huge facility with everything. You have exotic animals from everywhere, hence the name, House of Panthers. It was required to have rhinos, to have tigers and panthers, cougars, all these things from all over the world, and that's one thing. And then we have a really huge pool inside where you can swim, and even put ships in there. And then of course all kind of gourmet kitchen, and then of course women. The women are not concubine. The non-concubine women, and many of them, let's say, are well-known prostitutes. And this is really, really concerning for the imperial literatis, because what if a child was born in here? Do you consider him a bastard child, or do you just refuse to recognize him? This is a serious problem for the imperial bloodline. Well, lucky for them, I guess the Emperor Wuzhong might be infertile. He never had any children.
So I guess the 8 tigers in particular, and eunuchs more generally, the tension between them and the literati is around this idea that they're there to give the emperor everything that he wants and to entertain him and to indulge everything, whereas the literati want him to be doing his work and getting on with the business of being emperor. So you've got this tension between the two groups beneath the emperor about what the emperor should be doing.
This is the major conflict between the literati and the 8 tigers. And literati hated this, so they always wanted to dissolve the group. And they were actually successful. Like I said before, the 8 tigers were not entirely, that closely related. Some of them like Zhang Yong, we said before, he really hated Liu Jin. There were inner power struggles inside the Eight Tigers, and then eventually Literati were able to use these as the advantage. So several of these eunuchs were brought in the plot against Liu Jin, and eventually Liu Jin was framed to be an assassin. And it was said that he wanted to assassinate the emperor and then took the position as his own. So it sounds ridiculous, but that's exactly the plot they were making. So it was made real. So Liu Jin was executed. His entire property was confiscated, and it was actually a very, very huge amount of property. With Liu Jin's death, the Eight Tigers dissolved, and some of the Eight Tigers were exiled. Some of them remained in the bureaucracy, especially the ones that cooperated with the Literati. And some of them went right into oblivion. We don't even know what happened to them.
It's interesting that they don't share a fate, because that really plays into the idea that, as you said, that they weren't a group who were working very closely together. They just happened to be the 8 kind of heads of the bureaucracy who were doing their own thing. But that meant that one of them could fall and the rest could continue. So some go into exile, but some continue in the post. They don't all 8 of them fall at the same time.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's the common thing for Ming eunuchs. The Eight Tigers, I would say that the reason there's an 8 Tigers existing is because all 8 of them were the manservant of the Wuzhong Emperor, and nothing more. It can be in other reigns when manservant of the previous emperor still work as the manservant of the current emperor. All these works, and nobody gave them specific names. So many of these so-called infamous eunuch groups are just like that. At least in Ming Dynasty, it's just like that. Literati gave them a name and pretty much paint them as the main villain, and then use this against them.
And I mean, they end up now as the villains in an Assassin's Creed computer game. So we're still casting them as the villains.
The vilify of Chinese eunuch, especially Ming Dynasty eunuch, has never stopped, because in Ming Dynasty eunuch actually has more power and more a better social status. So many Ming literati blame the fall of the dynasty on them. We won't say they were entirely innocent, but they did truly participate in the in accelerating the fall of the Ming Dynasty. So when we go all the way to the Qing Dynasty, the Qing leaders, the Manchu leaders, they were aware of this whole thing, and they were also aware that eunuch had brought destructive outcome for the entire dynasty if kept unchanged. So in the Ming Dynasty, there's this thing that what I called it destigmatization. It's basically eunuch trying to use the power they have and to raise their social status and live a semi-normal life. And in Qing Dynasty, this process has been reversed. So we can actually call it re-stigmatization. So the Qing eunuch were treated even worse. And then many of these, discriminatory descriptions, like saying they are subhuman or non-human, saying that they are monsters, all these things came from either late Ming literati or Qing scholars. And the vilify never stopped. It was only worsened in Qing Dynasty. The only time the vilify stops is when Imperial China falls. There's no more monarch, there's no more imperial family, and there's no more eunuch.
And do eunuchs persist right up until the fall of Imperial China? When does China stop having eunuchs around court?
1911 is the last year of Imperial China. After that, the Qing Emperor was forced into resignation, and then China enters a new era. This is known as the Republic of China time. So when China becomes a republic, of course, there will be no more imperial service needed. The imperial palace was, at that time was still retained as the living place for the emperor, but all these servants and bureaucrats and eunuchs were pretty much gone. There are only a handful of servants left for the young Qing emperor. And then after, I think, several years, even the Qing emperor was cast out. So the imperial city will become a museum.
Incredible to think that tradition lasted for so many centuries, millennium, I guess, right up until the 20th century. What would you say is the legacy of the Eight Tigers? Is it that re-stigmatization of eunuchs that around the time of the Eight Tigers, they sort of reached a pinnacle of being more involved in government, and that as a reaction to their power, the eunuchs are re-stigmatized and they fall from power a little bit more?
Well, I would say that the eight, if we're looking at this whole thing, from a perspective that is including all the dynasties, the Eight Tigers is truly, truly insignificant. All they did was, provide, I would say, unlawful entertainment for the empire, and that's about it. None of them has really huge powers. In Ming Dynasty alone, there's two eunuchs we can mention that surpassed the Eight Tigers. One is Wang from before. That was several reigns before the Eight Tigers. This person, he was the mentor of the emperor. He was trusted by the emperor, and then he was so trusted he was able to lead the imperial army on a campaign against the Indonesian nomad, where the emperor acted as personal commander. And then it was a farce, and it led to one of the most serious critical defeat of the Ming imperial army, known as the catastrophe of Tumu Fort. So 90% of the imperial army were eliminated. Wang Zhen was killed in the battle, and then the emperor was actually captured by the Indonesian nomad. This is much more serious than what the Eight Tiger did. And then later, in several reigns later, we also have the infamous eunuch known as Wei Zhongxian. And this person, well, he pretty much gained control of the entire hybrid bureaucracy. So everyone is listening to him. And then for anyone who has resentment, anyone who has problem with him, or illegally captured and tortured in the Eastern Depot. Eastern Depot is it's basically the Gestapo of Ming Dynasty, let's say. So he has much more power. He had much more power than Eight Tiger, and he was much more infamous. So that's, like I said, Eight Tiger was really insignificant in this case.
But they get a cool name, so.
Yeah, well, they truly have the cool name, but it is something that Literata gave. We have similar names in history as well, like the 10 Attendants. The 10 Attendants was also a group of 10 eunuchs in Han Dynasty, and these are also the infamous examples because they were also the controller of the entire bureaucracy. At that time, there's no hybrid bureaucracy, so you can imagine if they had control on the Literata bureaucraty, they must have more power. And the emperor even outright said that these people are like my parrot. These were the people who were responsible for the falling of the Western Han Dynasty. They were responsible for the chaotic in the middle of this entire for the Han Empire. But all these are actually not at the peak. All these are not at the peak. At the peak of it was in the Tang Dynasty, where they actually had the plot of regicide. They were able to kill a current emperor and plant a puppet emperor there that's under their control. There's no more eunuch who reached this peak after the Tang.
I find it so interesting that for a stigmatized group who are considered to be criminals and somehow less than human on many occasions, they manage to accrue so much power and authority and wealth and land and all of those things that you would associate with being almost an elite in society.
Yeah, it is, because it is only human nature. Like we said before, imagine you are a monarch you're a crown prince who was born in the imperial city. The people you saw every day are essentially, beardless men, the beardless men who tend to all your need, and they're also being very kind here. And then the bearded men, who are usually serious, they were your mentors. They're here to educate you. And if you don't comply, they will get angry. And these beardless men, they're much kinder. So of course, you will grow attached to all these beardless men. That's how eunuch gain power. Many of these people are, gentle, and then when they listen to all your problems, and sometimes even offer their ideas on it. And if you don't like it, well, they will kneel down and apologize. This will never happen on the bearded man. But this is just generalization, but you can imagine how wonderful and attached.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. The last thing I always like to do is offer guests the opportunity to step into the Animus, as if we're in Assassin's Creed, to travel back in time. So is there a particular moment in the story of the Eight Tigers, or perhaps of any other eunuch, that you would particularly like to witness?
If I were to design this, I would like the protagonist to get involved in the plot against the leader Liu Jin. Liu Jin was framed as the person who wanted to assassinate the emperor, and there's all kind of special tools or a design. For example, a fan with blades inside. We don't know how he used it. Maybe he never knows how to use it at all. But that's the concrete example that had him killed. So, if that's the case, we're gonna have this whole thing to be prepared by our protagonist, who was a assassin to begin with.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Che. It's been absolutely fascinating to understand a little bit more about the eunuchs' roles at the Chinese courts and what they meant and the ways that they could grow to power. Thank you very much for sharing all of that with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for watching Echoes of History. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about the real history behind the Assassin's Creed games, then subscribe for more episodes. You can check out the extended interviews wherever you get your podcasts by clicking on the link in the description. For more great videos in history, hit the links on the screen. Do you see what I did there? History hit the links? No? Okay, sorry.